Well, go ahead and have our last thesis presentation for the week. Next week, as you know, we have 2 full days, Monday and Tuesday. Then after the holiday, Thursday and Friday will be at Bali Pade at the Barley Media Center or Media Room. All right, so we'll finish today with Trishelle. Trishelle's been fun to teach. I like her topic, anything about animals and zoos. As a bird guy, I like to talk about, and so we've had lots of talks about conservation, about the role of a zoo in conservation and all that sort of thing. So these are Trishelle's words. She says, "I would like to thank God for accompanying me throughout this whole process of thesis. All the teachers who have supported me, Mr. Wade for the patience, Miss Maymay for the guidance, and Mr. Moon for the helpful feedback. To my family and friends for all the love and care they have provided." Her title is Boo or Zoo? It's Overdue. The urgent need for investment in Indonesia's zoos. Give me a second to set the timer up and I'll tell you when you can start. All right, you can start when ready.
Shh. Listen for a second. Have you ever noticed how quiet it's getting? In the deep forests of Sumatra and the high mountains of Papua, the sounds we all grew up with, the chirping birds, the chattering monkeys, the roaring tigers, are starting to fade. It's as if the music in our islands are being turned down, one song at a time. The luscious forests that have always been home to our animals are shrinking, and for many of them, there is nowhere left to run. So imagine if we could invest in a safe place for them. Investing in our zoos isn't about building cold cages. It's about building a future. It's making sure that when our children grow up, they don't just see these animals in picture books. It's making sure they can actually look them in the eye and know that we cared enough to save them. But to see where we are going, we must look at where we began. For centuries, zoos were born from a desire for power. Royal menageries, where animals were mere trophies behind iron bars, existing only to satisfy human curiosity. Thereafter, models of the modern public zoo became popular during the Age of Enlightenment. By the mid-19th century, zoos had opened around the world, with some still existing until today. Nowadays, zoos are increasingly more focused on animal welfare, conservation, and public education, moving beyond historical menageries to create naturalistic and immersive habitats for these animals. Yet, developing zoos, particularly in biodiversity-rich nations like Indonesia, still demand significant improvements. And make no mistake, the stakes in our country are incredibly high. Indonesia ranks second as the most biologically diverse country globally. Our islands are home to around 700 mammal species, 700 reptile species, 1,700 bird species, 400 amphibian species, and 1,200 freshwater fish species. And if we need a reminder of how dangerously urgent this is, but when we look at the zoos we have built to protect this treasure, the reality is devastating. A shocking assessment conducted by the Scorpion Foundation found that roughly 90% of Indonesian zoos are completely unfit for habitation. Instead of saving lives, they are failing the most basic welfare criteria, leaving animals to suffer from severe hunger, thirst, pain, discomfort, and severe stress, stripping them of their natural behaviors. And if we look at the zoos we have built to protect. And if you need a reminder of how dangerously urgent this is, we only have. This crisis forced us to step back and ask a fundamental question. What is a zoo actually supposed to be? Well, The zoo means a place to collect wild animals outside of their natural habitat, which can be controlled by the government or non-government and functions as a breeding ground for natural genetics to be maintained. Another vital definition is animal welfare. In a zoo, animal welfare refers to how an individual animal experiences its own world. It is a balance between pleasant experiences like vitality, safety, and excitement, versus unpleasant realities like pain, hunger, discomfort, fear, loneliness, and boredom. And if we need a reminder of how dangerously urgent this is, we only have to look at the headlines. The recent spotlight on a tiger escaping from an Indonesian zoo has shocked the public and left people wary of zoo conditions across the country. This escape is not an isolated accident. It is a symptom of ongoing welfare failures, lacking national standards, systemic fiscal mismanagement, and severe animal malnutrition. Thus, it is necessary for Indonesia to invest more resources into developing conservation-oriented zoos for three reasons. First, zoos have significant and direct and indirect effects on people, such as visitors, local communities, and the wider society. Second, zoos attract more visitors for ecotourism, which in turn boosts the country's economy. And third, zoos unlocks ethical advancements that are ultimately valuable. First, zoos have a massive life-changing effect on the visitors, the local communities, and the wider Indonesian society. Families, as one of the smallest units of society, are positively affected by the recreational aim of zoos. Recreation serves as an essential bridge that repairs the gap between children and nature. Rather than promoting passive observation, zoos can host interactive workshops that cultivate future conservation leaders while transforming affordable family leisure into long-term environmental awareness. Research at institutions like Jakarta's Ragunan Zoo confirms that these visits function as crucial urban sanctuaries for conservation awareness and stress reduction. By investing in our zoos, we are turning family bonding time into a lifelong habit of protecting our home. Next, conservation-oriented zoos as centers of education have beneficial effects on larger societies. These institutions reach everyone through a mix of formal and informal learning. While traditional classrooms can overwhelm students with dry facts, studies on Taman Safari and Ragunan show that one-day outdoor learning models completely transform a student's understanding of nature. Yet, for this to work, we must upgrade our educational infrastructure. We have attempted to throw technology at exhibits without proper staff training and interactive design. The displays sit ignored. Investing in high-standard education, like trained, passionate guides and immersive theme tours, is a direct social investment. It empowers Indonesian citizens to move from passive wonder to active stewardship. Additionally, zoos are also places for research that can be utilized to protect ecosystems and human societies dependent on them. Modern zoos generate high-level ecological data on population dynamics, nutrition, and disease management that directly aids wild species survival. A prominent example is Bali Safari Park's rescue of the Bali starling, where intensive captive research on incubation and hatchling nutrition protected wild nests, helping the population surge from just 6 birds in the early 2000s to around 500 by 2025. Upgraded enclosures transform zoos into advanced laboratories, allowing captive breeding programs to repopulate threatened species through controlled care, rather than wild harvesting. Ultimately, the innovative strategies gained from this research protect the vital ecosystems, clean air, and water resources that local human communities depend on for their survival. Second, while many argue developing conservation-oriented zoos is not beneficial financially, they can actually boost Indonesia's economy. For instance, Indonesia can harness substantial economic benefits by emulating zoo development from other countries, fostering a flourishing ecotourism whilst generating high tourist revenue. High-impact zoological models in the United States, Australia, and Singapore act as vital national economic engines that generate billions in GDP and stimulate international tourism. By modernizing facilities like Taman Safari and Ragunan Zoo to adopt international welfare standards and integrated tourism strategies, Indonesia can transition from a low-ticket domestic market into a high-value international tourism driver that funds native species survival. To prove this fiscal value, economists utilize input-output systems like implant models to map how a single rupiah spent inside a zoo ripples through regional jobs, suppliers, and taxes. Aside from that, developing zoos create more job opportunities that can potentially reduce the rate of unemployment in Indonesia. In the United States, the direct ripple effect of investment was a total estimated employment of 126,000 people in zoos. Meanwhile, results from the development of Australia's zoos generated the employment of approximately 5,300 people. But modern zoos do not just create jobs inside their gates. They fund and manage thousands of conservation projects worldwide that integrate community development and education. By upgrading facilities, we can try and tackle our country's economy rate of unemployment, providing sustainable, meaningful jobs in the tourism industry that enhance our national economy. Then, through conservation projects and subsequent recognition for the efforts, income will be generated by like-minded donors. When sustainable zoos engage communities and maintain real credibility, they can secure long-term global support, allowing them to expand conservation efforts and reinforce their dual roles as protectors of wildlife. Take the San Diego Zoo in California, housing over 12,000 animals in pioneering open-air cageless exhibits replicating natural habitats. Because they gained attention as significant conservation and educational center, they generated over 292 million USD in revenue in 2023. Closer to home at the Singapore Zoo, noted globally for its emphasis on sustainability and earned approximately 72 million USD in 2025. A person's willingness to donate and spend is directly correlated to the conservation of animals. Therefore, Indonesia must strive to not only develop zoos that are economically beneficial, but also fearlessly prioritize the conservation and welfare of the animals. Third, channeling resources into zoos unlocks ethical advancements that yield lasting value. Improving zoos also helps to redefine ethics on animal welfare, enhance animals' quality of life, and promote positive experiences shaped by welfare science. In practice, this forces us to design exhibits shaped by the cutting edge of animal behavior and physiology. Reformed institutions like Australia's Adelaide Zoo and Monarto Safari Park actively apply these empirical frameworks through naturalistic landscapes and proactive environmental enrichment to eradicate stress. Their research ripples directly into the wild. An initiative for the endangered southeastern red-tailed black cockatoo has restored 500 hectares of critical habitat. This proves that when a zoo builds top-tier internal welfare, it generates a higher, broader, fruitful ethic. Not only that, developing zoos must meet the duty of care for animals while planting conservation-minded values. As human activities accelerate global biodiversity loss, zoos must transition into sanctuaries that shield genetic diversity and prevent extinction. Ultimately, a zoo's moral legitimacy is earned when its measurable benefits to global conservation clearly outweigh the cost of captivity. According to a study done by Godinez and Fernandez, visitors are 20 times more likely to participate in conservation activities like signing petition and donating while they are physically at the zoo compared to after they leave. As the late Steve Irwin stated, if we can teach people about wildlife, they will be touched. Share my wildlife with me, because humans want to save things that they love. By altering our systems from the inside out, we foster emotional bonds that ignite lifelong stewardship, environmental stewardship. Lastly, as God's stewards, humanity holds a divine mandate to exercise responsible dominion over creation, compelling humans to invest more resources in improving zoos as modern arks to preserve biodiversity that is entrusted to care. Just as Noah's Ark was built to preserve life during the cataclysm of the Great Flood, modern zoos serve as the arks of today, sheltering life from the current cataclysm of rabbit habitat loss. Genesis 1 verse 28 established our roles as active guardians rather than cruel exploiters. Psalm 50 declares that every beast of the forest is mine. We are strictly accountable caretakers of God's property, and the restorative work of a zoo acts as a bridge to honor that divine trust. Then, Proverbs 12, verse 10 tells us that the righteous cares for the needs of their animals, but the kindness acts of the wicked are cruel. But righteousness cannot exist without resources. The tragic decline of the Medan Zoo, where a chronic lack of funding caused the preventable deaths of 4 tigers in 3 months, stands in stark contrast seen when resources match compassion. This is demonstrated by the National Zoo's treatment of Acadia, a disabled eagle with a broken wing and a missing eye. Instead of being confined to a dark cage, she received a specialized habitat outfitted with custom ramps and climbing platforms, allowing her to thrive as an educational ambassador. Investment is what turns a tragic Medan-style failure into a triumphant Acadia-style success. Without resources, even the most righteous, well-meaning zookeepers is left completely empty-handed. If we want our institutions to honor God and protect our nation's soul, we must provide the capitals our wildlife deserves. Some argue that Indonesian zoos perpetuate cruelty through cramped enclosures, making funding a waste. It is a painful truth that many domestic facilities suffer from poor welfare, as seen in Surabaya, where animals died from plastic ingestion and starvation. However, the solution is not to starve these institutions, but to enforce strict international frameworks like those set by the AZA and WAZA to mandate species-appropriate spaces and the 5 domains welfare model. Proof that this works can be seen from the Singapore Zoo's reduced mortality 70% post-investment, while Ragunan Zoo saw a 40% improvement in behavior under WAZA-guided staff training. Properly resourced zoos stabilize society's environmental body, serving as vital organs for education and wild survival that flawed field alternatives can no longer provide. Other critics may argue that zoo breeding fuels illegal wildlife trade, fails at rewilding, and diverts precious funds away from habitat protection. Indonesia faces a devastating crisis, having lost 25 million hectares of forest to rapid deforestation. Yet, in a landscape vanishing at this speed, the modern zoo must be viewed as a last line of physical defense against total extinction. When the fragmented forests can no longer sustain life, integrated captive breeding programs become an absolute biological necessity for their survival. This is proven by the Sumatran rhino, whose numbers rose 20% through a critical collaboration between Taman Safari Indonesia and Way Kambas National Park. By acting as adaptive genetic arcs, these substantive collaborations safely preserve vulnerable lineages until their wild habitats can be recovered. Throughout this thesis, we have discussed reasons why Indonesia should strive to invest more resources into developing conservation-oriented zoos. We began by examining the significant effects zoos have on people, such as visitors, local communities, and the wider Indonesian society. We moved on to the aspect of boosting Indonesia's economy through tourism, employment, and donors. Finally, we ended it on ethical advancements that are ultimately valuable for the Indonesian people. So where do we go from here? While the big movement have to start in government offices, the heartbeat of the movement is us. We have to be the ones who care first. This means showing up at our local zoos, not just to walk through, but to really see the animals and hold our institutions to a higher standards. This means bringing our friends to see these animals not just as a weekend distraction, but as a shared heritage. Your hands, your voice, and your heart are the bridge. Let's make our zoos rise so our country can truly thrive. Thank you.
All right, good job, Trishelle. Thank you. Our panelists are Mr. Zoran and Ms. Sukma. Let's see, how about we go to Ms. Sukma first?
Trishelle, that was wonderful. Can I know why this topic comes into your mind? Why did you decide to write this?
Thank you for the question. So the reason why I decided on this was I've always been interested to animals as a child. And when Mr. Wade was asking us to pick topics for the thesis, I was going home from school and I saw how the Bandung Zoo was closed and that they had banners plastered all over. This made me wonder what was happening to the zoos in our city. So I decided to dig deeper into research and found that there was problems regarding the land management. So this urged me to make a thesis focused on the conservation and well-being of the animals in zoos in Indonesia.
Wow. Okay. That was probably going to be my next question. Why didn't you write about Bandung Zoo? This will be a good time when people can be awakened and try to understand, try to help. So why didn't you put it in the thesis for
Why
Bandung? For Bandung.
why I didn't put Bandung Zoo, or the reason why I didn't put Bandung Zoo as like a big topic was because it was already in some parts of my quality, and when I dove deeper into research, there were more scientific research and like journal that shows other zoos in Indonesia rather than the Bandung Zoo, which only had news, and for the thesis we needed scholarly journals and articles. That's the reason why it wasn't implemented as much in my thesis as I would like it to be.
Okay. Well, I signed in for this panelist because I do have the same opinion with you. So I really enjoy your thesis today. Um, from your writing, you have 4 aims of establish modern zoos. What do you think missing from Bandung?
I think what's missing from Bandung is definitely the conservation part as well as the management part. Because for once, the conservation part, Bandung Zoo has very like small and restricting cages compared to the very like good climate Bandung has as like a city. So I think it definitely lacks in the conservation part because I think Bandung as a colder city can definitely work to create more conservation projects that can be centered towards animals who live in colder climates. And another reason is the management part because there are definitely internal issues ongoing regarding the Bandung Zoo's like land ownership and property of the government and like a private institution. So I think what's lacking is these two aspects.
Wonderful. Maybe my last question will be in the first beginning of your writing, you say their natural habitats of the animals are sinking. So if you, one day, example, you have an opportunity to have a project to save these animals to have a better life, would you choose to have a zoo in the middle of the city or to preserve their natural habitat in the deep forest?
Thank you for the question. So, personally, if I were to have a project, I would definitely focus on integrating parts of using the natural habitat first. However, my thesis focuses on conservation-oriented zoos because I advise that the government needs to allocate budget to prioritize the welfare and well-being of the animals that are already captive in the zoos. So instead of neglecting them, it is better to also help conserve them and preserve them to make sure that zoos in Indonesia act as a bridge between the urban families, urban people, as well as wildlife.
Thank you, Trishelle. That's wonderful. I hope you can tag your thesis to Bandung Zoo and the government. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Miss.
All right, Mr. Zoran.
Okay, thank you, Trishelle, for the presentation. I must applaud you first for having a graceful, transition, even after you have some stop. It was good how you managed to go through it, so thank you for that. It's not easy, but you overcome that, so kudos to you. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I'm thankful for you to making this topic. I'm an animal lover myself. I mean, I watch documentaries, BBC, animal, was it National Geographic, and then many other things. And I have too many cats in my home. That's also there. But other than that, of course, let's get back to the questions. Okay, I'm actually curious about Singapore Zoo. Right, you mentioned about it. And, Singapore is such a small place, right? Yeah. But they have a zoo, and that's like, wow. Yeah, I'm just curious in your research, in your knowledge, since I never been there myself. How do they pull it through? How do they manage to have like a respectable zoo in such a small place where there is basically no no forest? Okay, what do you know about it?
Okay, so thank you for the question, Mister. So according from my research and knowledge, From a personal experience, I've been there as a child, and it definitely fascinated me how many like diverse animals they had in such a small city, in such a small country, like you said, in which they're lacking like the biodiversity part. But I think one of the reasons why they can establish such a good, well managed zoo is because the government helps allocate funds, and like the government knows the importance of having to bridge urban lifestyle as well as connecting it with nature. And one of the ways the government can do it is by conserving and preserving a well-established zoo in the middle of a small country.
Okay, thank you. Satisfactory, but I want to like add more onto that. Maybe you know more about it. I know that in a zoo management, there's the government part, the state participation. There is also some private corporation. They're gonna give you some money, right? Some campaign and whatnot, and then also NGOs, right? NGOs who like really do the education, do the research. What do you think is lacking the most in our zoo system? Surabaya, Ragunan, or maybe Indonesia, apa Bandung, yeah, compared to what you see in Singapore. What do we lack the most, and why do we have to like improve on that?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mister. So I think what our zoos lack the most compared to other countries like Singapore is definitely the government funds, because many of those end up in their own pockets, like due to corruption and fiscal mismanagement. And another one that I think Indonesian zoos lack is the partnerships with trusted non-government organizations like international institutions like the AZA, WAZA, SIAZA, uh, Ja'ad, and like Wildlife for Indonesia. So I think what Indonesia lacks is definitely the funds directly going to help aid the zoos and the partnerships with international non-government organizations.
Okay, thank you. On to my next question. Okay, have you heard about a guy named David Attenborough? Okay, you should read about it more. So he's a guy that just turned 100 years old. He's like Mr. Wade, but more like a bird guy, animal guy. He make BBC document. He's the face of BBC, Animal Planet, whatever. Yeah, and he make this one quote, which I think you actually embody in your thesis. No one will protect what they don't care about. No one will care about what they don't experience. So I think you're making a good claim in this thesis. But I'd like to like dig deeper about at least your understanding about some animal conservation methods. We have diverse species. You say we are the second most diverse country, right? We have different islands, different biome, and many other things. And as such, it is a gargantuan, a Herculean effort for us to maintain a good zoo, right? And to be honest, I mean, like what you said before, I'm feeling a bit pessimistic, if we can do all that task with our current government system. And your call to arms, what do you call that? Your call to action, it's powerful, but I still feel it's hard. But if you can like maybe make like a path, yeah. What's the first thing the government must do? Was it in the legislative, executive, or judicative? In your knowledge, at least.
Okay, so thank you for the question, Mister. The Despite like the government aspect, I've put in my thesis that it's not really leaning towards that. However, based on my knowledge and from what I know, I think that what the government needs to do is definitely work with trusted institutions that can make sure the funds that are allocated to the zoos go directly into the meat supplier, into the food suppliers, into the vets, and ensuring that the whole budget actually goes into the welfare and well-being of these animals as well as the zookeepers. This can be done through something called public-private partnership, in which it is a partnership between the government and private institutions. However, another way that this can be done is through partnering up with non-government organizations that are trusted, like PKBSI, Perhimpunan Kebun Binatang sa Indonesia. So I think that the government can definitely work to allocate these budgets through the non-government organizations to make sure that none of them actually go into their own pockets, but actually go to the zoos.
Okay, thank you. That is a complete answer to my question. Now, I'd like to know about the business model. Yeah, if I may know, where will you go to your college? What major you will take in
Oh.
Ritsumeikan, right? What major was it?
I think I'm going to take either accounting and finance.
Accounting and finance. Just like my question. Okay, so I'm just curious. Suppose that you're gonna be a business guy, a business manager operation for a zoo. How much should the ticket cost for a family, for a package, or for the children? What's your average calculation? At least in your understanding, yeah. And why is it better than what we have right now in our system? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I think this really depends on where the zoo is located. For example, in bigger cities like Jakarta in bigger cities, I think that the tickets can cost, like in bigger cities like Bali and Jakarta, they can definitely be more expensive. And for the exact pricing, I would say the price is whatever that can be allocated at least 50% to the welfare and well-being of the animals. So, for example, if it's like 100,000, I think that 50,000 will definitely need to go to the animals and the welfare of the well-being of the condition of the zoo. And for like smaller cities like Bandung and Bogor, I think that the pricing can be lowered, so it can actually serve to accommodate everybody, no matter their financial background, no matter their are they visitors or are they locals? Yeah, I think it definitely really depends on where it's located and where it's like leaning towards attracting tourists or locals.
Okay, on to my last question. I think I have like about 2 minutes left. Thank you, and I appreciate your answer. I just wish the government will put some of their great programs into something like what you said. Yeah, I think it's gonna be better than just waste it on food. Yeah, but I must say sometimes I see animal suffering. I think that tells a greater pain of what happens in a society than what if humans suffer. Now, my next question go with let's see. It's gonna be a bit bizarre, absurd, maybe even I would say imaginative. Yeah. What's your view of heaven? Do you think heaven will have animals, even acting animals, or will it be just us saying hallelujah every day? What's your view? I just want to know your opinion because you seem to love animals. I want to know your view about it. Thank you.
Okay, honestly, my view on heaven is definitely that's where we're going in our afterlife if we do believe in Jesus Christ. However, for the animal aspects, I am not really sure because I never really dug deeper towards where animals go after they pass. However, I do hope that if God loves all of his creation and all of the things that he created, he definitely will give like animals a place where they will go after their afterlife, or maybe their life just simply ends at being loved in the world.
Mystery, and I think it's best kept that way. Thank you. That's all from me. Appreciate that, Trishelle.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Wade.
All right, I have a few questions. So, as I told you once before, most, not all, but most conservationists kind of hate zoos, right? Because the idea is you've got animals that should be in the wild in cages. How would you respond to those people?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Wade. I definitely get the concerns coming from conservationists who definitely entrust animals to just be left out in the wild. However, in this case and in my thesis, I am not urging for the establishment of these zoos. However, I am urging the budget allocation to these zoos to make sure that the animals thrive even in confiscated places, as well for like animals who are definitely in need, like they cannot be released back to the wild. I think that zoos are a viable solution and viable option for these animals to be properly well taken care of.
Okay, so if you had your own zoo that you managed or something like that, and everybody wants a proboscis monkey and you don't have one, would you be in favor of sending a team to Kalimantan to find one in the forest, trap it, and bring it to your zoo?
Okay, thank you for the question, sir. No, I would definitely not urge to take. I would definitely not urge to take healthy species or healthy animals outside of their natural habitats. However, if my team were to stumble upon one who is like injured or like needs safety and protection, I think that it is okay temporarily to conserve these animals in the zoos. However, if it's possible, it's definitely better to release it back into the wild because then again, zoos are biological species that are meant to be guarded and entrusted to our care, not to be exploited for the sake of profit.
Okay. But do you like to go to the zoo and pay your money to buy your ticket?
So for zoos, yes, definitely. If I had the opportunity to go to zoos, I would go to zoos. However, tickets like the entry tickets, I would pay for it. But for like elephant ride tickets or animal like attraction tickets, I would definitely not pay to go to those because that means it's supporting the root effect of like it going against conservation.
Okay. So if you wanted to promote conservation, I think you are saying that zoos can do that. Is that right? Is that the best way to promote conservation? Maybe it's better to stand in front of a zoo with the sign that says, you've got set the prisoners free or something like that. What's the best way to promote conservation? Is it through zoos or is it through some sort of protest or what?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mr. So I think like fighting for conservation definitely has to start with protecting the wild habitats of these animals in the first place, like preventing deforestation and climate change, to like even preventing having the animals to be taken to the zoos itself. However, rather than protesting and rather than trying to like get rid of these zoos completely, it's better to try and tackle this problem by donating to non-government organizations so then they can actually allocate these funds into helping conserve the animals inside the zoos rather than protesting and causing a shutdown, which completely stops the economic cycle and like the resources the animals need to thrive in these animals in the zoos.
Okay, good answer. I think over the last decade or 2 decades, probably 2 decades or more, there's no doubt zoos have become more conservation focused, right? And in fact, many years ago, I guess it's been 3 decades because I'm really old, but in the San Antonio Zoo in Texas, they have a whole program for breeding Guam kingfishers back behind the scenes where people can't even see them. But their goal is obviously Guam kingfishers. Did you mention it in your thesis or just the paper? I mean, your speech?
I don't think I mentioned that
Okay.
type of species.
Okay, yes, but you know about it, right? The Guam kingfisher I think it's really extinct in the wild due to the brown tree snake, but it is being bred at zoos to keep it alive, and actually, I think perhaps they are reintroducing it on other islands. Is that the kind of thing that you see as perfect for zoos to be involved in?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mr. Yes, I think that this is a good way for zoos to be involved in conservation because aside from conserving these animals, not for the sake of public attraction, but for the sake of putting them back in the wild, it's definitely a good move to actually conserve and preserve these extinct species. And like another way zoos can like promote as good conservation centers is by allocating the funds that they get into actually conserving the natural habitats of these animals in the wild.
Okay, good. I'm having trouble coming up with the questions, but I have another one though. So another thing I've seen, and I don't know, maybe you know this too, but once a few years ago, I went with the 8th grade class to Tawan Safari, and we went behind the scenes. And what I realized for the first time is they have some Sumatran tigers there that the reason they're there is that they've killed people. And instead of putting them down, instead of killing them, they have caged them behind the scenes where they don't roam in front of people, but they do experiments, testing with them. They collect their genetic material and all that stuff for the purpose of conserving Sumatran tigers. What do you think about that? These things have killed people. Should they put them to death, or should they conserve them in that way?
Okay, thank you, Mr. So I think for this, it definitely relies on animal rights and animal ethics, because animal rights is the link between the rights of these animals to not be tested by the animals. And I think that despite them killing people, there are better ways to conserve them rather than exploit them for the sake of future conservation, unless these tigers are already like injured or at the brink of death. I think that it's more okay to like you not really use them, but like I think it's more okay to test on them for the sake of conservation. However, for the healthy tigers that kills people, I think it's better to just put them in a separate place and like still monitor their behavior and ensure they're thriving instead of like testing on them directly.
Okay, very good. And one last thing. These are softball questions, I know. There's in Austin, where I come from, in Austin, Texas, they have a zoo. It's called the Austin Nature Center, and it's entirely filled with animals who cannot go back to the wild because they've been injured or they've been brought up with people, so that they've imprinted on people, and it's all intended to be an education center. Would you say that is your ideal zoo, or something like that, or what do you think about that kind of a zoo?
Thank you for the question, Mr. So I think the ideal zoo is definitely to preserve animals in like habitats in as most like replicating as much as possible to their identical like natural habitats. So for these injured animals and like animals that can be released to the wild, I think that it's okay for them to be educational centers. However, they do still need the proper like habitats and proper enclosures to make sure that even though they cannot be released to the wild, they're still thriving in captivity.
Okay, good answer. Time's up. Good job, Trishelle. Okay, we have finished our last day of the week of Thesis. What we're going to do now, friends and family, panelist, advisor, will meet over here for photos with Trishelle.